This 67th episode and season 3 finale of Tommy Hazel Jet Jr.'s story is My Dad's Enemy.
Hello, my name is Tommy Johnny Son, and today I'll tell you the story about this person named Frank Grunt.
Full name Franklin Allen Grunt.
Or Grunny as he was often. He was a man who had a long time in life. He had a lot of bad luck, but he tried to work hard as fast he can. Because he's a great man, he was worked hard but never got breaks he deserved. But he didn't get up, and even though he got time, he meet my father, Jack Son, at high school when Frank was 16 and my dad is 17. And then he meet my dad again at the office worker. Frank just couldn't understand how my dad got away with being lazy and irresponsible. Frank was a good example of how life isn't always fair, even though he was smart and capable. Bad things seemed to follow him everywhere. He never gave up in his life, though he kept trying to make a better life for himself. Even his favorite food is peas for dinner, but he meeting my dad would change everything for him, and not in a good way. Frank Grunt's life was hard from the beginning. He was born unlucky and was raised by his neglectful parents who treat him like he was a just nothing. His father Braden Grunt and his mother Bernice Grunt are not pretty good parents, and they neglect him all because he was born unlucky and have a horrible life. Frank has an older brother named Francis Grunt who works as a military soldier, and Frank's younger sister Ruby who always kind to her older brother Frank. But Frank's parents only loves her because she was their favorite child, so Frank's parents give Frank a job when Frank just 4 years old, and he start delivery package to everyone. He had to work hard just to survive to his childhood as a young boy. Frank had to deliver newspapers and packages. He even dug ditches, and he delivers pizza. He's only 12 years old. What he had to do this time, tough jobs. Then on his 18th birthday, he was blow up in the silo explosion when he was in the hospital.
He was completely injured and felt pain and agony. He got hurt so bad because he survived the explosion.
Frank never gave up on his dream of a better life. In college he was study hard. He wanted to make something of himself. He knew education was the day of the key. When he had anger issues, when he work on his math. Frank Grunt determined to improve his life. He studied at night while working during the day. He even took correspondence courses, and he wanted to learn as much as he could. His hard work paid off. He was and graduated high school and earned his high school diploma. He studied office worker, computer and paperwork. Finally had a chance to have a job as an office worker and the good life. He got a job. He was excited to start his new career. He was finally going to be a success. Frank Grunt started his new job an office worker with enthusiasm. He was eager to use his skills. He was my work hard, but then he meet my daddy. My father was everything. Frank Grunt wasn't great. My dad's so lazy and way too much. My daddy was irresponsible, and yet my father have a good life. He work all day and play his computer work. Frank couldn't understand how my dad got away with his behavior. My dad was sleeping on the job. My dad caused accidents. My dad didn't even seem to care about to his work. Frank, on the other hand, followed every rule. He did everything by the book, but my dad seemed to be rewarded for his independence. My father had a knack for pushing people's buttons, and he'd take me, my younger sister Angela, and my youngest sister Lulu to a office worker during daddy's lunch, and turns out he eats Frank's sandwich, and Frank is not happy.
As he is.
My dad seemed to have a special talent for annoying Frank Grunt. He'd take credit for Frank's work. He would point the blame on Frank when doing something wrong. Frank tried to be patient. He tried to ignore my father, but my father's antics were just too much to bear. Frank started to lose his temper. He couldn't understand on his boss Tim, who was my dad's boss. Tim didn't fire my dad. It seemed my dad was untouchable.
Says Tim never fired my dad, Jack. Tim support my father. Even he liked him, but my dad being lazy.
And Frank hate my dad now, and Frank and my dad are enemies. One night evening my dad invited Frank to dinner at his house. Frank was fooled and confused, into attending. He was once again by my dad. But he thought LT might a chance to see my daddy outside of work. Maybe he could understand my dad better. But dinner was a disaster because my daddy's house was a mansion and my daddy has a perfect family, including his wife Mia, which is my mom, his children, which is my siblings,
including me,
the family dog Rover, and my dad cooked lobsters for dinner. I didn't know Frank likes lobster. Frank doesn't understand why my dad was astronaut go to space, and his Grammy, and Frank was confused right now. He realized as my dad's life was just absurd as his work life. Frank determined to expose my dad for the unfair and fraud he believed him to be. Frank trying to tell everyone at the office worker about my father's incompetence. He pointed my father's mistakes. He showed who my father was a danger to himself and others. But no one listened to Frank. They all thought he was jealous to my dad. They saw my dad as harmless. They thought Frank was overeating. Frank was shocked. He couldn't believe that no one else see what he saw. Frank was snapped because my dad was too much for Frank.
And Frank can't take it anymore with my dad's actions.
Frank had reached his breaking point. He couldn't understand how the world could be so unfair. He had worked hard his entire life. He followed the rules, and yet, here he was miserable and out of his mind. He started acting my dad and ran to a work office, ranting and saying about my dad. Frank grabbed a pair of high-voltage electrical wires and he claims he was Jack Mixon,
which is my
dad's name. Frank could touch them because he was Jack. A cold Frank was electrocuted and died. Frank Grunt's death was shock to everyone at the office worker. It was a tragic end of difficult to Frank. The next day, my parents and my siblings went to Frank's funeral, even though my dad forgot about Frank and continued his usual antics. So my dad fall asleep at Frank's funeral. In next month my dad bring Frank back to life. And here he is. He turned Frank back to life by using a spell book. Then he was borrowed the wizard's book and the wizard said yes. So my dad bring Frank back to life. My dad says to Frank and he says, Frank, you're back. I miss you. I thought you dead. And Frank says name was in a coma or something, but it turned out I dead, but think you bring back to life so. And my dad says that's great. So now let's talk about me. And Frank says Jack the old me would have been your threat for such insensitivity. And Daddy
says to Frank, and he says,
do you want to be friends? And Frank is not sure. Did you even know that Frank was marrying to a woman named Holly and have 2 children, the 11-year-old daughter Dee Sally and the 9-year-old son Mike, and Frank works at the construction worker. That makes sense because my dad is also a construction worker, and that's why my daddy has it all. Old enemy. The end. See you in the next episode.
Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. So bye! Destiny Booker Studios.
Wow!
Hello!